Hi everyone, I hope you're well. So, today I'm talking about Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human. You might find this funny, I guess. Maybe more than a year ago actually, I made a video about like my favorite book titles, so just the titles themselves. And I said that I felt like this was one of the best titles to exist. I'm not sure really about, I think I once knew but I forgot the original title of this book. I know that in Spanish it's actually something closer to Unworthy of Being Human, which looking back is a little bit more accurate, I guess, to what the novel actually says. But yeah, I was curious to read it. I had read a few reviews saying that this was like extremely misogynistic, which I'm also interested in giving my views about. So this book is set in the kind of 20s to 30s, in Japan, of course. I didn't actually know that it was set so long ago, and I was a little surprised actually because it just felt so contemporary in a sense. But then I think there was like one moment in a sentence that I was like, oh, this takes place in like a different time, where he says something about sending a telegram or something like that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, it's true. I mean, I could have also read the back part, right? But I don't really tend to read blurbs before I read books because I feel like sometimes they kind of taint or spoil your experience of the book. Long story short, I kind of have mixed feelings about this book. As for the writing style, I mean, I know I can't really say much because this is translated, of course, but I do feel like the writing style is one of the better aspects of this novel. There's definitely a lot of really interesting ideas and opinions that are just given to you in this very simple way. I do want to say that it necessarily has a very simple writing style, although I did feel that it was very simple. I feel like this is actually so, I mean, it's not a light-hearted novel, of course, but I do feel like it's so easy to read in a sense that you could get through this in one sitting, maybe a couple days. But I find this easy to read in that sense, and frankly almost enjoyable in a way, despite the subject matter and everything. As for the characters, or I guess the main character, he is definitely interesting. So I had read that, you know, it was misogynistic or whatever, but I didn't expect the misogyny to be such a big part of the novel. I didn't think that so much of it would be about him and his relationship with women and his thoughts about women. I mean, one of the first things he says is that women are less than human and that they're even worse kind of than men are. It was published in 48, but I guess it could have been written before that. And it does say here that it's semi-autobiographical, which kind of gives me the idea. I mean, I did feel the whole time that like I was just reading the author's thoughts directly and he was just telling me about his life. And maybe I was kind of wrong in interpreting it like that, but I don't really have as strongly negative feelings towards this character. He's whiny, he's annoying, he's really mean and hateful and takes advantage of people and just like is so cynical and just sees the actual worst in everyone all the time. And you know, it's pretty obvious that he hates himself as much as he hates other people. But even then, I feel like hating people so much just gets kind of annoying, or at least it gets annoying to read about it all the time. As for the misogyny again, I think a lot of people will say like, well, it's set in like the 20s, 30s, and it was written in the 40s. I read a lot of things from that era, and frankly, even Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer didn't feel as misogynistic as this did to me. Now, did it completely ruin my experience? Not really. I mean, I still feel like it kind of has a major point to give you, and he does kind of hate everyone. He just has a more specific hate towards women. And in a sense, I feel like there's something kind of self-aware in the novel about this hatred, because you know how he starts the novel saying that women take advantage of him. And near the end, I mean throughout the book and also near the end, you realize that he's the one that he's has been taking advantage of women the whole time. And he maybe hasn't quite recognized it, but he kind of, it seems that the author is banking on the idea of you recognizing it on his writing. Although granted, even after he kind of recognizes that he harmed all these women, he still goes on to make his wife's rape all about himself and how he felt about it, which I just felt so, it was so selfish. I mean, even by his standards, I mean, you cannot see someone having like a horrific thing happen to them and just make it about yourself. I mean, that's just, I mean, there's a limit to everything, and it's hard to feel sympathy for this guy. Now, that's not really a spoiler because he actually mentions it earlier in the novel that happens to his wife. Just in case you were about to get angry at me. But what's, I think, really saves this novel, even in terms of like emotional connection with the main character, is the fact that you know that he doesn't actually wanna be pitied. Like, it's not, I don't feel like the novel wants you to feel bad for him. You're not, it doesn't feel like that. Like, you're meant to kind of feel sympathy for him. In fact, he kind of despises the idea of people like feeling sorry for him. And he seems to be aware that he's not someone to feel sorry for. And that's kind of what makes me feel sorry for him, because he knows that he's, I mean, I don't want to call him worthless, but he is really so, I mean, he's such a burden on everyone that he comes across. Like, he harms everyone that ever comes across him. He does nothing but like leech off of people, and he doesn't even treat them nicely. I mean, he's just someone that's hard to love, you know? Even then, there were parts in the novel that I kind of like, I mean, this is a fictional character, and this is like ridiculous to say, but there were parts in the novel in which I was like, if I had, you know, this is such a ridiculous thing to say, but there were parts where I was like, you know what, if I had been there, maybe I would have been able to say this or that, or done this or that for him. I guess you could argue that some people like him don't really deserve it. I don't know. I mean, something about, let's go back to the title, right? Like, no longer human, or unworthy of being human in the Spanish version, which again, like I said, I think is more true. I think it's more faithful to what the novel actually says. I think that he is very much human. I mean, you could argue that he's kind of a psychopath because he very rarely shows any empathy for anyone, and even then I feel like there were a few glimpses here and there where there could have been something there, but I think a lot of it had to do with, you know, I guess how he saw the world, because it doesn't really seem that everyone mistreated him, as is the case of a lot of stories of these people who, you know, turn into serial killers or what have you. It doesn't seem that he was like mistreated by everyone in his life. He does talk about being abused by a servant because he grew up rich, and that's one of the things, I guess, that people think make him whiny, because he was like a very privileged kid, and he still complains a lot about his life. Although he also did experience poverty later on in his life, and I guess that kind of early experience of abuse, I could argue that it kind of changed his perception of the world and of people around him, right? I guess his idea of the world was kind of shattered early on, because for a lot of us, I would include myself, I'm just gonna put it down, for a lot of us, I would include myself, kind of had this more sheltered childhood, I guess, and I wasn't really, you know, abused sexually as a child or physically. So I, in a sense, I was kind of sheltered from, in the sense that I was kind of innocent, right? Like, I had this innocence about the world, and I didn't really know what the world was really like until I kind of, you know, hit puberty and started to see all these new things in a new light and so on. But I guess there's people who do, you know, like, they lose that pink colored vision of the world early on. They don't really have a childhood that they can look back at and like have this like place where they felt safe. Not to say that those people necessarily will turn out like this guy, right? But I think he is one of those people who never really had this like idyllic, idealized version of the world, and he always knew that the world was like this really cruel place, and it was only being confirmed to him, even if not very often, because he was privileged. Maybe there's something of that, and maybe there's something genetic, who knows. I mean, it's the same old debate about nature versus nurture. And I'm not sure that I would full on just call him a psychopath, because like I said, he does have some hints of empathy for others, and it's mostly because in situations where he kind of identifies with those people that he empathizes with. But in the end, empathy is empathy. He is definitely misogynistic, but he does really seem to hate everyone, including like all of his friends were people that he considers to be like idiots. Most women that he's ever in a relationship with, he considers to be stupid, or like very one-dimensional and like empty. But at the same time, there's something interesting happening here, in the sense that he has this feeling of shame, and shame is like such a social feeling, because you only have shame in terms of in front of other people, or in thinking about what other people may think of you, how they may perceive you. So in a sense, it's kind of paradoxical, because he is very critical of others, and he basically thinks that like the entire world is like a bunch of dumbasses. But at the same time, it's like he values these dumbasses' judgment of him, because why else would he be so ashamed by everything that he does, if he didn't think that people's opinions of him were relevant in some way? Of course, there's something cultural going on, right? I am aware that Japan is like a country where, people have these really like strict social rules, and that there's people who even decide to like be, stop being part of it, because they can stand living in such a socially difficult circumstance. And I figure, because of this novel, precisely that kind of social aspect isn't anything new. Like, that was already a thing 100 years ago in Japan, where people had like these extremely specific, like very subtle social expectations, and I guess he was like afraid of not fitting them, and he was kind of preemptively rejecting himself and expecting shame. Now, I do understand why there's people who like really, really hate this book, and I also understand why there's people who really, really love this book. Like I said earlier on, I have complex feelings about this. I would not really feel honest giving it any more than 3.5 out of 5. So overall, a positive rating, and again, that's strongly because of that kind of aspect of the fact that I don't feel that I'm ever made to feel bad for him. Like, the narrator is really self-aware of how unlikable he is. This unpleasant person is so complex that it kind of makes the novel justify itself. Like, it's not just a pointless novel about like some guy who hates everyone and hates his life, but rather, it has something else to say, and it does have some very interesting ideas and opinions here. I guess this is fairly representative of like early 20th century existentialism, maybe. I was not a fan of certain aspects of his novel, but for the most part, I think it's frankly worth reading. I definitely think that you should read this. I mean, in the sense that, if you want something not necessarily lighthearted but easy to read. In the summary here, the blurb, it actually says, without sentimentality, he records the casual cruelties of life and its fleeting moments of human connection and tenderness, which is really, really representative of the novel. This one phrase really like sums up the novel in one phrase, because it is very non-sentimental. Like, you may think that because it's a very depressing read, it's like really dripping with all these like metaphors about repression or what have you. That's not really the case. In fact, it's often a little bit humorous even. I know some people weren't able to finish it, like DNF'd it. It's actually quite short. It's about 170 pages or so. It is definitely a full-out novel that is worth reading. So I hope you enjoyed this video, you found it interesting or helpful in any way. Tell me what you think down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.